Well, hello everybody. So I'm recording this video this week in a different location than I did last week. I'm in the space where I teach my online English classes to my students in China every week. I moved because the lighting on that other video was terrible and I tried my best to get it worked out, but it just wouldn't. So I'm going to try to find another space to record in. I'm sorry about all this business behind me. That's stuff I use for class. Please don't let it distract you. I hope that it doesn't. But listen, last week I talked to you about sort of my history with anxiety and panic attacks. And this week I wanted to talk to you a little bit. This week's video is aimed more at people who don't suffer from anxiety and panic attacks than those of us who do. And it's things that I think that those of you who don't suffer with anxiety and panic attacks should know about people who do suffer with anxiety and panic attacks and about the conditions themselves. So if you're someone who suffers with anxiety and panic attacks and you're watching this, I want to encourage you to bring people in to watch the video, people in your lives who maybe don't suffer, but who are there to support you. Maybe this video will help them understand a little bit more about what we go through as sufferers of panic and anxiety. So I wanted to start out with first just a little bit of a discussion about what is generalized anxiety disorder. The Mayo Clinic defines generalized anxiety disorder as excessive ongoing anxiety and worry that interfere with day-to-day activities. People may develop generalized anxiety disorder as a child or as an adult, and generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, I'll call it from now on. GAD has symptoms that are similar to panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and other types of anxiety, but these are all different conditions. So what are some of the symptoms of GAD in adults? And I'm specifying adults here because in a minute I'm going to talk to you about the symptoms of GAD in youth and adolescents, which can be different. So the symptoms of GAD in adults are persistent worrying or obsession about small or large concerns that is out of proportion to the actual impact of the event itself. So we worry about things, either small things or big things, but our worry about those things is completely out of proportion to the actual impact that the event has on our lives. Also, the inability to set aside and let go of worry. We worry constantly. We're not able to just stop worrying about something. That's an extremely common symptom of GAD in adults. The inability to relax or restlessness and feeling always on edge and keyed up. Difficulty concentrating or feeling like your mind goes blank. We have trouble concentrating on things, or oftentimes we just slip off into a time when our mind is just kind of blank. I know that's hard to understand, but it's kind of like daydreaming, only not really daydreaming. We've kind of shut everything down. We worry about worrying. Now, this one is kind of, it almost sounds silly, but it's true. We worry about our worry. We worry that our worry is going to damage us in some way. And so if the worrying that we had about other things was not enough, now we also worry about worrying. We distress about making decisions, or we have fear about making the wrong decision. Now, I know that some of these symptoms are sound like things that that everybody has, and a lot of them are. But the difference between I shouldn't say normal, the difference between typical people and people like me with generalized anxiety disorder are that our fear about making the wrong decision or making decisions in general is so excessive that it shuts us down and we're not able to make decisions at all. So it's not like typical people who worry that the decision they make is wrong. That's one thing. We worry to the extent where we just completely shut down. We often carry every single option in a situation all the way out to its most possible most negative conclusion. So in other words, no matter what the situation is, the way we think about it is we take that situation and we carry it out all the way to its possible most negative conclusion. We have difficulty handling uncertainty or indecisiveness. And this is more about other people than it is about us because we have enough indecisiveness on our own. We also have difficulty dealing with people who are indecisive or uncertain about things. It agitates us, it causes that anxiety to sort of well up in us as well. Fatigue, constant fatigue, irritability. Our emotions seem to be on edge and changing all the time. Muscle tension or aches, very common. Trembling or feeling twitchy. This is a very common symptom for me. I oftentimes get shaky and feel like I'm shaking really on the inside, not on the outside. Being easily startled, trouble sleeping. Now, this is not something that I suffer from a lot. In fact, I'm kind of the opposite. I sometimes sleep too much. But a lot of people who have GAD have a lot of difficulty sleeping or getting to sleep. Nausea, diarrhea, or other irritable bowel syndrome. This is very common in people with anxiety disorder. Anxiety symptoms are often manifest in the gut and can cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome. And then also headaches. So those are some of the symptoms in adults. And understand that symptoms vary from person to person. Not everyone has all of these symptoms, and some people have different symptoms, or they're manifest differently in people. So that's for adults. Now let's talk about symptoms in young people and adolescents. Um, we often see adolescents who are suffering from GAD have difficulty performing well at school or in sporting or other extracurricular activities that they do. So if you have a student who's generally a good student, a good athlete, a good musician or whatever, and then all of a sudden their grades start suffering, pay attention to that. That can be a symptom of not only of GAD, but of other things. But oftentimes, young people who suffer from GAD do have trouble performing at school. Difficulty being on time. They seem to always be running late. This can be a symptom of GAD. Again, I want to stress, just because you have a teenager who runs late doesn't mean that teenager is suffering from generalized anxiety disorder. But if it's a real problem and if it becomes a bigger problem and is accompanied by some of these other symptoms, you might want to talk to someone about that. Fear of catastrophic events, tornadoes, earthquakes, nuclear war, other catastrophic events, kind of an unusual fear of those can be a sign of GAD. Now, of course, we're all nervous about things like that, but this, again, we're talking about a consuming fear, a fear that sort of consumes the person beyond what would be a typical reaction to it. Feeling anxious or overly anxious to fit in. Again, the symptom is so typical in teenagers, but we're talking about a teenager who is anxious about it all the time and anxious above and beyond what a typical teenager would be anxious about. Being a perfectionist, a tendency to redo things, redo tasks because they aren't perfect the first time. Spending excessive time doing homework. Now, I know this is like every parent's dream, but again, we're talking about students who will spend 3, 4, 5, 6 hours on homework because they're redoing it over and over and over again to get it perfect. Striving for approval, seeking everyone's approval. This is especially true on social media. If you have a young person, a teenager, who is on a lot of social media and they get very anxious about the number of likes or the number of comments or the number of views that something they've posted on social media can have, there might be an issue there. It might be an anxiety issue that's being manifest in that way. And then finally, requiring a whole lot of reassurance about performance above and beyond what's typical for teenagers, that they want assurance from their parents and from their peers and from their teachers that they're doing a good job. These are students who, or teenagers who constantly seek approval with everything that they do, and they never can seem to get enough approval. Again, I want to stress these symptoms are not necessarily, if you see them in your child, they don't necessarily mean your child has GAD, but if there are many of them and they are becoming a problem, then it might be something that you want to think about. So those are kind of the explanations of what GAD and what anxiety disorder are. Now I want to talk about panic attacks. What are panic attacks? Well, again, from the Mayo Clinic, a panic attack is a sudden episode of intense fear that triggers severe physical reactions when there is no real danger or apparent cause. Panic attacks can be very frightening. When they occur, you might feel like, or the person who has them might feel like they're completely losing control, or they're having a heart attack, or they're having a stroke, or they're dying. Mayo also says that many people have just one or two panic attacks in their lifetimes, and the problem goes away, maybe when a stressful situation ends. But if the person is having recurrent and unexpected panic attacks and has spent long periods of time in constant fear of another panic attack, that person may have what's called panic disorder. It differs from generalized anxiety disorder in that panic disorder is accompanied by those panic attacks, where generalized anxiety disorder is just sort of a general worry about things all the time. Panic attacks are actually manifest physically in the body with these physical symptoms. And although panic attacks aren't life-threatening themselves, they can be extremely frightening, and they can significantly impact your quality of life, as they have with mine. And I can tell you when I say, or when Mayo says a sudden episode of intense fear, this is the most intense fear that you can possibly imagine. So imagine the most scared you've ever been and multiply that by about 1,000. And that's what a panic attack feels like. That's the sort of fear that comes with a panic attack. Again, I want to talk about symptoms, but I want to stress that symptoms can vary widely from person to person. Not everyone has the same symptoms, and not everyone's symptoms are always the same. But these are some of the symptoms of panic attacks. A sense of impending doom or danger. Just a feeling like something bad, really bad, is about to happen. A feeling of unreality or detachment. It's almost as if you're standing outside of your own body looking back at yourself. A fear of loss of control or death. We don't always fear that we're going to die. Oftentimes, my fear is that I'm going to lose control in front of people and embarrass myself. Rapid pounding heart rate. This is a very common symptom that I have. Sweating, trembling or shaking, shortness of breath or tightness in your throat, chills or hot flashes, either one. Abdominal cramping, again, anxiety is often manifest in the gut, so abdominal cramping, chest pain, headache, dizziness, lightheadedness or faintness, numbness or tingling sensation. Now, imagine, I just listed all of those feelings. Imagine having this intense fear all of a sudden come over you and experiencing all of these symptoms or some of these symptoms on top of it. It's a very scary thing. So panic attacks, again, are not physically dangerous in and of themselves, but they're extremely frightening. And over a period of time, if panic attacks are not dealt with, and if they continue, they can cause a significant impact on a person's quality of life, and I've experienced that myself. Another thing that I think that it's important for people who don't suffer with anxiety and panic attacks to know is this: we're not crazy. And I think it's important to say that. It really is important to say that, because a lot of the times if you come across us when we're having a panic attack, it might seem like we're losing it a little bit. Or if you're involved with, or if you know someone who suffers from that generalized anxiety disorder, it might seem like maybe we're not, maybe we're having a little bit of insanity because we worry about things that don't need to be worried about. But we're not crazy. We're not insane. In fact, some of the most intelligent and creative people in the world suffer from panic attacks or anxiety. Leanne Rimes, the country singer, Johnny Depp, Adele. Adele tells a story about one time when she was getting ready to go into a concert. I can't remember where it was. I think Sweden or somewhere like that. She was getting ready to go into a concert and got this overwhelming sense of fear, and she just bolted out of the venue. She left the arena where the concert was, and nobody could find her for like 10 minutes. So that's how intense her fear was. Scarlett Johansson, the actor, all of these people are known to suffer from anxiety and panic attacks. Some psychiatrists and psychologists, and I almost hesitate to mention this because it's really not provable, but it's worth talking about. Some psychiatrists and psychologists who have studied his writings even believe that Abraham Lincoln may have suffered with at least some sort of anxiety disorder as well. Again, not provable, but from some of his writings and some of the things that we know about him, some psychiatrists believe that he may have suffered from some anxiety. Now, you don't need to fear us. People who have anxiety disorder and panic attacks are not dangerous. We're not going to hurt you. So you don't need to be afraid of us. We're not crazy. We just suffer from this condition. Another thing I think it's very important for people who don't suffer with anxiety and panic attacks to know is there is no switch to turn it off. You know, a lot of times I've had people say to me, well, can't you just get up and do something that makes you happy and laugh and just turn it off? And the answer to that question is no, I can't. We can't. There's no switch to turn it off. Oh, how I wish there were. I would spend any amount of money that I could get my hands on and that it required to buy a switch like that to turn it off. And I promise you that most people who have anxiety, probably all people who have anxiety and panic attacks, would say the same thing. Not only would we spend the money to buy the switch, but we'd turn it off and then we'd lose the switch so that it never came back on again. So there's treatment available that can help with anxiety and panic attacks, but the fact is there is no cure. Those of us who suffer from anxiety and panic attacks will probably always have it. So there's no switch to turn it off. We wish there were. Next, we probably can't tell you what we're afraid of. I have a lot of phobias. I'm afraid of heights. I'm claustrophobic. I don't like big crowds, and on and on and on. But the truth of the matter is that these phobias are not usually what lead to my panic attacks. They have been in times past, but usually my panic attacks seem to come out of nowhere without warning, even sometimes when there doesn't seem to be any stressor or trigger around, they happen. So these phobias that I have often don't cause my panic attacks. If you come to one of us who's having a panic attack in the middle of a panic attack and you ask us, what are you so afraid of? We probably can't tell you. All we can tell you is that we're afraid. We're very, very afraid at that moment, but we have no idea what we're afraid of. Many people will wake up in the middle of the night from a sound sleep having a panic attack. I've had that happen to me. So don't be alarmed or don't be confused if you ask someone, what are you so afraid of? And they can't tell you because we just don't know. We haven't given up on life. You know, I hate that look of pity that people give you when you tell them that you suffer from anxiety or panic attacks. I mean, you know the look, right? They kind of furrow their brow and put their eyebrows up like this and tilt their head a little bit to the side, and their voice gets really quiet and they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." You know, I appreciate your compassion. I really do appreciate your compassion, but not pity. Please don't pity, because although many people who have anxiety and panic attacks suffer from some level of depression, We don't often run to our beds and confine ourselves to our beds for months at a time, even in times when we can't leave the house, which has happened to me when my agoraphobia got so bad that I couldn't really even leave the house. Even in those times, I'm not shut up in my room with the lights off and in my bed with the covers pulled over my head eating chips and hot sauce. I'm busy in my house doing things. My busy may not look like yours, but I'm still busy even in those times. Oftentimes busy trying to get better. So we haven't given up on life. It's just that life has handed us a really crappy thing with anxiety and panic, and we have to deal with it the way that we have to deal with it. Finally, and this is most important thing that I think that those of you out there who don't suffer with anxiety and panic attacks need to know. If you know someone who you think might be suffering from anxiety or panic disorder, please, please encourage them to get help, because there is help and there is hope. No, there's no cure, but there's help that can make your life significantly better if you reach out and get that help. Now, this is especially true, I want to say this is especially true of adolescents and young children. If you know any adolescents or young children who are suffering from panic or anxiety, or you think they may be, it's very important that you help them get some help. The research has shown the younger the person is, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The earlier in a person's life that treatment for anxiety and panic attacks begins, the better the results are. So if you know of a kid or an adolescent who you think may be suffering from anxiety or panic disorder, I encourage you to help them get some help, because there really is help. There really is hope. And for those of you out there watching who do suffer, again, I want to remind you, as I'm going to remind you every single time I do a video, you are not alone. There is help, there is hope, and you are not alone in this world. All you need to do is reach out for that help and for that hope. If I can be of help in any way, I will. I'm going to remind you again, I am not a trained professional. I am not a medical professional. I am not a psychiatric professional. My training, my experience with anxiety and panic disorder is that I have it. I suffer from it. So I'm talking to you out of my own experience. I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm not giving you psychological advice. If you need help, you need to reach out to a professional who can help you. But know that you are not alone at all. Down there in the summary of this video, I've given you all of my contact information, and I encourage you to reach out to me if you need, or if you want to ask a question. If you want to comment on this video, please comment on this video. But know that I moderate all comments. So if you have something that you want to say just to me, just let me know in the comment that this is private and you don't want it posted. I absolutely will not post it, but I will respond to you. I've got other contact information down there, my Facebook page, my Instagram page, and my blog page, of course. And I encourage you to go to my blog and read my blog posts that go along with these videos. There's a lot more information on the blog than I put in these videos. So all of that information is right down there in the summary of this video. Also, if you're watching, I encourage you to like this video, subscribe to my channel, click the bell so you get notifications, and as always, please share this video if you think it's worth sharing, because you never know who you may know who could benefit from some of this information. That's it, guys. Until next time, I wish you love and light forever. Bye-bye.